Hello and welcome back to the Advanced English podcast by I Speak English. I'm Hayley, and today we're going to be looking at a topic that, let's be honest, makes the world go round, and that topic is money. Now, before we get into it, don't forget to like, subscribe and share this podcast if you enjoy it. It really helps the channel to grow, and it means that I can keep making more episodes for you as well. And if you'd like to learn even more with me, head over to www.englishclassesonline.co.uk. That's where you can find video courses, you can take a lesson with me if you like, and there's lots of other resources to help you improve your English in a natural way as well. Right, let's get into the episode then. Right, so money. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Everyone wants it, everyone needs it, but hardly anyone wants to talk about it. In Britain, especially, money is one of those taboo topics like politics or asking someone how much they weigh. You just don't do it. It's seen as a bit vulgar and a bit crass to talk openly about how much you earn or how much something costs. If you ask someone in the UK how much they make, they'll probably squirm a little bit, laugh awkwardly, and then just change the subject. We are a bit weird about it. In fact, I'd say that in Britain, we've got this strange relationship with money. We kind of love it, we want more of it, but we also kind of look down on people who show it off too much. There's that kind of classic British thing of wanting to be comfortable, but not flashy. You know, in the UK, we respect people who are, modest about money, people who keep it under wraps and who don't brag about what they've got. There's almost this unspoken rule that you can be rich, but you just shouldn't act rich. Like, don't show it off, don't be too much. It's quite different from, say, the US, where success and wealth are often seen as things to celebrate and to shout about. But in Britain, if you flaunt your money, you drive a Lamborghini through a village or post photos of your 5-star holiday in Dubai, people will probably roll their eyes and just call you a bit of a dickhead, really. The attitude is, if you've got it, fine, but don't go rubbing everyone's nose in it. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? This kind of cultural mix of pride and embarrassment when it comes to money. On one hand, people are working hard to get ahead, to save up, maybe climb the ladder and own their own home one day. But on the other hand, we almost judge people who do it too well. It's a kind of classic British contradiction there. But I think a lot of the kind of attitudes towards money do come from upbringing, and a lot of how you deal with money as adults comes from what you see growing up. So if you grew up in a household where money was always tight, where your parents were kind of scraping by, almost counting the pennies, maybe arguing about bills, you probably learned to be careful with money. Maybe you hold on to it a bit too tightly, or maybe you've developed a fear of spending because you're always worried that it'll run out. But on the opposite side, if you grew up in a family where money wasn't really a problem, where holidays were booked without too much thought and the fridge was always full, then you might have a much more relaxed attitude. You might even take it for granted, at least until real life hits and you realise money doesn't actually grow on trees. And then there's the middle ground, people who weren't rich but they weren't really poor either. People who saw their parents make ends meet by budgeting carefully, shopping around and avoiding waste. That kind of upbringing often produces quite practical, sensible adults who know how to manage what they've got. If you ask me how I grew up, it's funny, my perception of this has changed, because I would always say, I grew up working class, because that's what I always thought myself to be. But when I look back, actually, we were probably much more middle class. Like, don't get me wrong, my parents worked hard. My mum was a cleaner, my dad had tons of different jobs growing up. He used to work nights, he used to work in a factory, he was a taxi driver, he had a post office at one point. So, it's not like they were, highly educated or went to university or anything like that. They always worked. But the stuff we could afford, we'd go on a couple of holidays a year, where we even went on holiday to the USA. We had a house, we had a couple of cars. money didn't really seem to be much of an issue when I was growing up. So I would probably say I grew up more lower middle class than working class now. But obviously now you can get way less for your money than what you could get back then. So the amount of money probably wasn't that much, but with inflation and everything going up, now it kind of seems like middle class. But it's funny though, you kind of inherit your parents' attitudes towards money, often more than you think. Like I remember growing up and my mum would say things like, turn the lights off, the electricity won't pay for itself, or, we're not going out to eat, we've got food at home. And even now when I'm financially okay, I still hesitate to splash out on things because that little voice in my head goes, do you really actually need that? It's kind of fascinating how those early lessons stick with you. And they don't just shape how you spend, they shape how you feel about money as well. So some people see money as security, others see it as freedom, some see it as a source of stress. And let's be honest, most of us have some kind of emotional baggage tied to money, whether it's guilt about spending, or fear of debt, or just this constant feeling that we should be saving more. And speaking of spending, let's talk about consumerism for a second. So has it all gone a bit too far? I mean, we live in a world where people queue overnight for the latest iPhone, where, influencers push products every 5 seconds down your throat. You're constantly told you need the newest thing to be happy. It's mental. And we've become a culture of just constant upgrades. Like, you've got a perfectly good phone, doesn't matter. There's a new one with a slightly better camera, so suddenly yours just looks ancient. You've got a nice car, great, until your neighbour shows off their new one. It's this never-ending race, and most of us don't even realise we're running it. And the scarier thing is, consumerism's kind of become tied to our self-worth now. People define themselves by what they own, and what brands they wear, and what car they drive. And you see people getting into debt just to keep up appearances, like buying stuff that they don't need to impress people they don't even like. It's madness, really, but it's everywhere. Advertising, social media, even on the news. You're just bombarded with messages constantly telling us to buy more, have more, want more, and it's quite exhausting, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't enjoy nice things. I like buying stuff as well, but I think we've lost the balance a bit. It used to be that buying something new felt special or like a treat, and now it's just normal. And when everything's normal, nothing really feels satisfying anymore. And that brings us nicely to this idea of retail therapy. We've all done it, right? You've had a bad day, you've gone shopping, you bought something we didn't really need, and then suddenly you feel better for about 10 minutes. There's actual science behind it though. Like, buying something does release dopamine, that feel-good chemical, and then that gives you a little buzz and that sense of control and that temporary happiness. And that's the problem. It doesn't last. You get the hit, but then you get the crash back down to reality after. And that's why some people get caught up in this cycle. They buy to feel better, and then they feel guilty for spending, and then they buy again to cheer themselves up. It's like this vicious cycle. We've all been there. You tell yourself, I deserve this after a long week, or it was on sale, so technically I'm saving money. You talk yourself into spending. But deep down you know you didn't really need that new pair of shoes. And again, it comes back to the emotional side of money. We attach feelings to it. Success, comfort, self-worth. When life feels out of control, buying something can make you feel like you've taken a bit of power back, but it is short-lived. And talking about power and money, let's talk about the big one, the cost of living crisis. Because honestly, I don't think there's a single person in the UK right now who hasn't felt the pinch. Or anywhere else in Europe, to be honest. Like, even in Spain where I live, everything has just gone through the roof. Like, rent, food, bills, everything. You name it, everything's gone through the roof. To give you an idea, according to the Office of National Statistics in the UK, food prices are still around 25% higher than they were 2 years ago. That is insanity. You're paying 25% more for food. Have salaries gone up 25%? Absolutely not. Energy bills are down a bit from when they peaked in 2023, but they're still almost double what they were before the pandemic. And the average household gas and electricity bill now sits at around £2,000 a year, which is insane when you think about it. Like, who's got £2,000 to just spend solely on electricity? And then what about rent? Don't even get me started on rent. Like, the average rent outside London just hit £1,300 a month. In London, it's over £2,600. How on earth is anyone supposed to save money with that? Like, you're basically paying over half of your salary just on rent. And then how much? Like another, 10%, 15% on electricity and gas? There's no wonder people are cutting back on basics. Some people are skipping meals, they're turning their heating off, or, living off instant noodles just to make ends meet. Things are bad when people start rationing energy like it's wartime again. Even middle-income families, people who would normally be quite comfortable, they're feeling the squeeze. You hear stories all the time of people with decent jobs, or even multiple jobs, who are still struggling to get by, having to dip into their savings just to pay for everyday essentials. Like, it's tough. And what's worse is, wages haven't kept up with inflation. The average worker's pay might have gone up a little bit, but when everything else is rising faster, it's like running on a treadmill. You're working harder, but you're getting nowhere. And a lot of people started taking on extra jobs as well, or side hustles like teaching online, or delivering Uber Eats, or doing freelance gigs, just to stay afloat. And I think that says a lot about where society's at. The cost of living crisis isn't just about money, it's about quality of life. People are stressed, they're tired, and they're burnt out from constantly trying to keep their heads above water. It is exhausting. And obviously, when life gets more expensive and wages don't rise fast enough, what do people do? They turn to credit. So according to the Money Charity, as of 2025, the average household in the UK owes over 65 grand. And that includes mortgages, loans, and credit cards. But here's the worrying bit. Credit card debt alone is up nearly 12% from last year, which means more and more people are relying on borrowing just to cover basic expenses. That's terrifying when you think about it. Not borrowing for big purchases or holidays, just food and bills. And the mental health side of it's massive as well. The charity Mind found that 1 in 3 adults in the UK now say money worries keep them up at night. And about half of young adults say they've felt depressed or anxious because of debt. It's no surprise, really. Living with that kind of financial pressure just weighs you down and you just can't switch off. You're constantly doing mental maths in your head. Can I afford this? How much is left in my account? When's payday? It's relentless. And once you're in debt, it's hard to get out of it. Interest rates are high as well, around 22% on average for credit cards. So even if you are paying it off bit by bit, it feels like you're chasing your tail. You pay one bill and then another one pops up. You finally clear your overdraft and then your car breaks down, or your washing machine goes kaput and suddenly you're back to square one. It's this constant cycle that just grinds people down. And it's not just individuals either, businesses are struggling too. Small business closures are at the highest level since 2008. Shops on the high street are shutting down left, right and centre because rent and energy bills have gone up, but foot traffic has gone down. And it all adds up to this feeling of uncertainty, doesn't it? Like no one's quite sure what's going to come next. Now let's talk about something that really gets people talking, inequality. Because even though everyone's feeling the cost of living squeeze, some people are definitely feeling it a lot more than others. According to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the richest 10% of households in the UK now hold almost half of all wealth, while the poorest half share just 8% between them. 8%. That's insane. And it's not just about savings or investments, it's about opportunity too. If you come from a wealthy family, you're more likely to go to a good school, graduate without debt, buy a house before you're 30. If you don't, you're probably renting forever, paying through the nose and watching property prices climb out of your reach. It's a massive kick in the teeth, really. You can work your socks off, you can do everything right, and still struggle to get ahead while others are just born into comfort. And the irony is, we're constantly told that hard work pays off, but does it really? The data doesn't quite back it up anymore. The average CEO in an FTSE 100 company earns over £3 million a year, while the average worker earns £34,000 a year. That's a 90-to-1 pay gap. And you see it everywhere in London. People in finance raking it in, while others doing the graft in hospitality or social care, they're barely scraping by. It's no wonder people are angry. There's this growing sense that the system's just not fair, that the rich are getting richer and the rest of us are being told to tighten our belts and get on with it. And yet, what's fascinating, and very British I think, is that people still cling to this belief in fairness. Like, we still like to think that if you work hard, you'll make it. That luck doesn't matter. The effort's everything. It's a lovely idea, but it's getting harder and harder to believe, really. So we've kind of talked about this wealth inequality, but there's also something else we can't ignore, which is the pay gap, especially the gender pay gap, which unbelievably still exists in 2025. According to the Office for National Statistics, the overall gender pay gap in the UK currently sits at about 14.3%, meaning that on average, women earn just under 86 pence for every pound that a man earns. And that's the overall figure. In some sectors, it's even worse. In finance and insurance, the gap's closer to 25%. And in areas like construction and tech, it's not far behind. It's shocking, really, considering we've been banging on about equality for decades now. And it's not just about wages, it's about progression too. Women are still underrepresented in senior roles. Only 10% of CEOs in FTSE 100 companies are women. And even though that's up slightly from a few years ago, it's still miles off being balanced. And on top of that, women are also far more likely to take time out of work to raise children or care for family members, which then affects their earnings long term. There's even a phrase for this. It's called the motherhood penalty. And it's real. Research shows that by the time a woman's child turns 12, her hourly pay is on average a third lower than a man's. And then to add insult to injury, there's what's called the pink tax as well. If you've never heard of it, this will probably wind you up as much as it does me. Basically, the pink tax is when companies charge more for products marketed at women than for the exact same products that are marketed to men. So, for example, women's razors often cost more than men's, even though they're basically identical. They're just pink instead of blue. A 2024 report by money.co.uk found that on average, women's personal care products cost 37% more than the equivalent men's version. 37%. And you might be listening to this thinking, well, why don't they just use the man's deodorant or the men's razors? That's not the point. The point is it shouldn't cost more in the first place for an identical product. Why are women being charged more for an identical product when they earn less money? Even deodorant, same brand, same size, just a different label, and women are paying through the nose for it. And don't even get me started on period products. Tampons, sanitary pads are still taxed as non-essential in some countries. They're thankfully not in the UK anymore since 2021, but globally it's still a thing. Then there's the ethnicity gap as well, which doesn't get talked about nearly enough. So according to the Resolution Foundation, on average, workers from ethnic minority backgrounds earn 7% less than their white counterparts, even when you control for education and experience. So yeah, when people say we're all in the same boat, it's not really true, is it? Some people's boats are yachts, and others are just trying to stay afloat in a dinghy with a hole in it. Now, let's talk about gig economy, because that's become such a big part of how people work and earn money these days. So things like Uber, Deliveroo, Fiverr, Upwork, jobs where you're technically self-employed, but you're actually still working for a big company that calls the shots. So on the surface, it sounds great. Flexible hours, work when you want, be your own boss. But if you dig a little deeper, you start to see the cracks. So according to the Trades Union Congress, there are now over 4.4 million people in the UK working in the gig economy. That's about 1 in 8 workers. And while some of them probably genuinely love the freedom, most are doing it out of necessity rather than choice. They're doing it to top up their income, to make ends meet, or just because traditional jobs aren't cutting it anymore. But the problem is with gig work, you don't get the same protections as regular employees. There's no sick pay, there's no holiday pay, and there are no guaranteed hours. You could be out delivering food in the pouring rain all day and still barely scrape by. A study by the University of Bristol actually found that average gig workers earn £9.30 an hour after expenses, which is below the UK's real living wage of £12 an hour. And that is grim. And it's not just about money, it's the instability as well. Like some weeks you're raking it in, others you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs waiting for the next order or gig to come through. Now I know a lot of people who do freelance work online, like translation, design, that kind of thing. And they say it's brilliant when it's busy, but it's terrifying when it's not. Like you're constantly chasing invoices, juggling clients, keeping one eye on your bank balance, just in case the work dries up. It's freedom, yeah, but it's also exhausting. You're your own boss, but you're also your own accountant, marketer, and admin assistant, and it's a full-time job, just keeping it up. And that's the thing, we're told that gig work is the future of flexibility, but really it's flexibility for companies, not really for workers. The companies can cut you off, drop your hours, change your pay rates overnight, and there's just nothing you can do about it, really. Like, don't get me wrong, for some people it works. Students, parents, people who want to just earn a bit of extra cash on the side, it's handy. But is it a long-term solution? Don't think it's that sustainable, really, on the long term. Alright, it's all been a bit negative so far, I feel. I feel like I've just been complaining about money for the last 20 odd minutes. So let's get into something maybe a bit more positive. Let's talk about money and happiness. So does money really buy happiness? It's that big question. Well, the short answer is kind of. Again, I've done a little bit of research on this. There's actually been a famous study from Princeton University that found that happiness increases with income, but only up to a certain point. And that's about £75,000 a year in today's money. So after that, after you make 75 grand, if you keep making more money, it doesn't really make you happier. It just makes your life a bit easier. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because money can buy comfort and freedom and security. Like it can get you out of bad situations, help you afford a decent home, or just give you experiences that enrich your life. But after your basic needs are covered, rent, food, heating, a few nice things, happiness stops rising in proportion to wealth. So you might get a nicer car or a bigger TV or fancier holidays, but it doesn't actually change your day-to-day sense of fulfillment. In fact, sometimes the opposite happens. Studies show that people who are too focused on money often feel less satisfied overall because they're constantly chasing more, but they never get more, or they never get enough, let's say. We do have an expression actually in English. It's, people say, well, you can't take it with you. Meaning, like, when you die, you can't take your money with you after you die. So you're just spending your whole life working for money, but in the end, it doesn't matter, because you can't spend it anyway, because you're dead. So what matters more is time, health, connection. And there's also this comparison trap. You might earn a decent salary, but if your mate earns more, suddenly you feel poor. We're always measuring ourselves against other people, and social media makes this way worse. You're scrolling through Instagram, see people jetting off on luxury holidays, dining out in posh restaurants, and you think, what am I doing wrong? But here's the thing, half the time it's just smoke and mirrors anyway. People are living beyond their means. They're racking up debt to maintain this image. And behind those glossy photos on Instagram, they might just be miserable. True happiness, I think, comes from just feeling content. Like, you're not constantly wanting more. Money can give you freedom, yeah, but it can also trap you. if you're not careful. Like, I remember reading something by an economist, I can't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of money buys happiness when you spend it on experiences, not things. And I think that's spot on. Like, the memories you make, the people you meet, the time you spend with loved ones, that's what sticks, not the stuff you buy. Like, when you're on your deathbed, I can't really imagine you being, like, oh, I remember back in the day when I bought my iPhone 15, whatever the fuck. Like, you're more going to be like, oh, do you remember when we went to this place and we saw this amazing thing and da-da-da. You're not going to be thinking about the things you had. You're going to be thinking about what you did with your life, right? Not the stuff you buy. And speaking of getting older, let's talk about some kind of generational differences when it comes to money. Because this is where it kind of gets interesting. I think every generation seems to have its own unique relationship with money, shaped by the world that they grew up in. If you talk to baby boomers, they'll tell you about a time when you could buy a house on one salary and when jobs were stable and when saving for a rainy day was just what everyone did. And then you've got Gen X, who came of age kind of in the 80s and 90s, the Thatcher years in the UK. The rise of credit cards, consumerism, and the kind of greed is good culture. They were the first to get into debt. Not because they had to, but because they could. Like, buying on credit suddenly became normal. Buy now, pay later took off. Then there's the millennials like me. We've had a completely different experience. We were kind of basically told if we worked hard and got a degree and followed the rules, then we'd be fine. Only to graduate into a financial crisis in 2008. Sky-high rents, job insecurity. We've seen wages stagnate, house prices skyrocket. And now we're the ones trying to play catch-up in a system that's basically stacked against us, really. And then Gen Z, after us, they're growing up in the age of TikTok finance, side hustles, crypto, influencers flashing cash online. On one hand, they're incredibly financially aware. They talk openly about things like investing, which is great. But on the other hand, they're also under massive pressure to succeed early, to get rich quick, to build multiple income streams before they've even hit 25. I've seen this phrase as well floating around online, money anxiety, and I think it sums that up perfectly. Like, people in the 20s and 30s are just burnt out. They're constantly comparing themselves to others, feeling like they're falling behind even when they're doing fine. And it's not surprising, really, because when you scroll through social media and it's all, how I made 10k in a week, or why you're broke at 30. Like, you can't even watch a YouTube video without someone trying to sell you a course on how to be a millionaire. And what's sad is, it's created this kind of collective guilt. Like, if you're not hustling 24/7, then somehow you're failing. But here's the thing. Every generation faces different challenges. For boomers, it was inflation and interest rates. For millennials, it's housing, it's job security. For Gen Z, it's the mental toll of living in a world that's constantly shouting, do more, earn more, be more. And it is exhausting, honestly. It's no wonder people are opting out and they're choosing to just live simply, move abroad, get off the grid, and just focus on life rather than chasing money all the time. I actually find that quite refreshing. You can see young people questioning what success means. And they're saying, hang on, I don't want to work 70 hours a week just to afford a flat in Zone 4. They're prioritizing well-being over wealth. And I think that's something that we can all learn from, frankly. And that brings us to another question. Is it easier to earn money now than it used to be? I mean, to me, I look back at my parents' generation, again in the UK specifically, and I think, God, they had it good. Like, they went to work normal, 9 to 5. They could afford a house. They could afford multiple cars. They could afford multiple holidays a year. They never seemed to be worried about money at all. And then I look at my generation and we're working way more than 9 to 5. There is no chance we'll ever be able to afford a house. I mean, I don't even drive, so I've not even got a car, but I couldn't even afford a car if I wanted one. I think, oh my God, it must have been way easier to make money. But then In some ways, it's easier now. It's never been easier, actually, to make money, because you can make money online now, and you can start something from scratch. So I think if you want to run your own business, it's a lot easier to start a business now, especially online. And it's a lot easier to earn like passive income, through like YouTube, for example, TikTok, affiliate links. You can sell products on Etsy, you can teach lessons online, or, freelance work from anywhere in the world. So technology has really opened doors that didn't exist 20 years ago, and you can literally make a living doing something you love if you play it smart. Whether that's, baking cakes or gaming or, giving English lessons like me. But, and it is a big but, while there are more opportunities, there's also a lot more competition. The online space is flooded. And you're relying on algorithms, which can essentially just make or break you. Like, look at me, for example. I'm an English teacher, but yet here I am with a podcast and having to make videos every week just to get people to be able to see me online so that maybe they'll take a lesson with me. Because I haven't got 20 grand a month to drop on online advertising, because that's how much you need to pay to make online advertising actually worth it. Not to mention, like, the market's really oversaturated as well. So again, massive amounts of competition. And, for every person online who's raking it in from social media or YouTube, there's 100 of us who are barely scraping by, putting in long hours just to get, pennies back. And that's the side that people don't always see. Yes, it's easy to start, but it's not necessarily easier to succeed. Plus, the cost of living means if you're earning more, it doesn't always go as far as it used to. I think that's the main difference, really, between millennials and boomers, at least. We might technically be earning more money, but again, none of us can afford a house. We can barely afford a car. A lot of people can't even afford to have kids these days. So your money does not go nearly as far as it used to. There was a study by the Resolution Foundation, and it found that the average 30-year-old today earns less in real terms than someone the same age did 15 years ago, despite being more educated and working longer hours. So while the tools to make money are more accessible than ever, the system you're making it in hasn't kept the pace. That said, I do think there's something really empowering about the fact that people are taking control of their income. Like, you don't have to wait for a promotion or beg for a pay rise. You can create your own opportunities. You can build a brand, you can set your own rates, go after clients, etc., etc. That kind of independence is powerful, but it also means you've got to be disciplined. No one's going to hold your hand or bail you out if things go wrong. So it is easier to earn money creatively, yes, but not necessarily easier to keep it or to build real stability. So where does that leave us? Money's complicated. It's emotional, it's cultural, it's personal, and yet it shapes almost every decision that we make. Yes, it can give you freedom, but it can also tie you down. It can open doors, it can shut you out. It's not good or bad in itself, it's what you do with it that matters. And the funny thing is, no matter how much we talk about it or avoid talking about it, money's never really about numbers. It's about values, priorities, and how we see ourselves in the world. Whether you're saving for a rainy day, paying off a debt, or trying to get your side hustle off the ground, just remember, money's a tool, it's not the goal. It's there to serve you, not the other way around. Right, that's where we'll wrap things up for today. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I really hope this episode's given you something to think about, maybe help you see your own relationship with money in a slightly different light. If you found it interesting, helpful, or if you picked up some new vocabulary along the way, please do give this podcast a like, subscribe, share it with a friend who might enjoy it as well. And if you want the full transcript and vocabulary list, you can find it in the description. The link is there for you. And if you want any private lessons to help you improve your spoken English, head over to www.englishclassesonline.co.uk. You'll find everything there. As always, keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye.